What's going on, everyone? A very happy new year from 20KGDOWN. May your 2019 be just awesome, and I hope your 2018 was just as good. So in this video, we're going to talk about clinical trial. We need to understand, as consumer of medical supplies, supplements, cosmetic products and everything, what is clinical trial, what are clinical studies, because these are the very key things or scientific research sort of thing that doctors and industries use to find out the effectiveness of certain things. So let's get into it. So by definition, or maybe not by definition, just a wee bit more descriptive definition, clinical trials are scientific studies that are designed to find out better ways to diagnose, screen, and treat diseases in human. So these are specifically for human. Of course, clinical trials happen for animals as well, but what I'm talking about here is about human. So what is it that we find out through clinical studies or clinical trials? So there are strict guidelines or procedures that span several years through which we have to put through. Let's say, for example, you want to bring medicine to the market. So anything, let's say some sort of paracetamol in the market. And you know that this thing should work. So clinical trial is like the last but the very important phase of the whole journey of this particular tablet from becoming a chemical in the lab to getting to someone's prescription. Right, so human clinical trial goes through 4 distinct phases, and these are regulations that are jotted down by drug authorities across the world. In US, it's FDA. In India, it's Indian Drug Authority. And then, of course, in Japan, they have their own drug authority as well. So these are governing bodies. So the companies that want to actually bring some drug into the market, they gotta put through their drug into all these trial phases, collect all the data, send it out to the authority for approval, and then only it can go to the market. So let's first start with phase 1. This can last for from some month to a year or a couple of years. It's a short generally. So when the animal trial is already done before that, right? Now the drug is taken and subjects are brought into sites. So 2 important factors we got to think about. Subjects, the people who the drug would be given to, they're called subjects. They're people like you and I. And then sites are hospitals or medical institutes where these trials are taking place. So these subjects, they are given enrollment forms and they have to come to these places and take the medication, give the vital, sometimes blood samples to test some records, and then go. They have to keep on doing it for a period of time, sometimes in exchange of money, sometimes just voluntarily. This is how it happens. So the first phase, the subjects that are chosen, they not necessarily have the problem that this drug is supposed to solve. So they're just random samples. They're taken to find out primarily the dosage and the side effects that can happen on a random population. That's a short span, and it kind of closes down on the actual dosage, the human dosage for this particular drug. And when stage 1 doesn't actually show any significant issues, then to move it to stage 2 or phase 2, where it's generally longer, lasts several years, and the population is more, and the more important thing is that the population actually has the problem which this drug is supposed to solve. So we're talking about bringing people in or subjects in who have reported continuous migraine issues, right? So this is a headache solving drug or something like that, and they have migraine, so probably good match. So that sort of subjects are chosen, and then this can last for 2 years to 5-7 years or even more. And the sites are bigger hospitals are chosen, and or medical institutes are chosen, and bigger populations are chosen, because now we're talking about, and these days things have become much more granular. You can target a particular medicine for a particular gene group or a gene pool or a geography. A lot of things have happened in the field of clinical trials. Anyway, coming back to this point. So when this particular stage, it decides the effectiveness, or this is one thing, because we are giving it to people who are actually suffering from the situation, and also the side effects, if any. In all these stages, side effects are encountered, side effects are taken note of, because that has to be sent out to the regulatory authorities. When we don't find really something really that is a stopper or a showstopper at phase 2, move to phase 3, which is an even larger set. And larger by the meaning is not the number of subjects, but by the vastness or diversity of the subjects. So generally, these things happen in different states, different continents at some time, and the sites for big pharmaceutical companies, they send out. Either they outsource it to different healthcare institutes or they set up their own sites and collect the subjects. Again, the subjects are actual people suffering from the problem, and the side effects and dosage and anything that was missed in phase 2 is attempted to be found out. The idea for clinical trial is to find out or gather more information about this drug before it hits the market. Now this is until it hits the market, that is phase 3. Phase 4 is when it hits the market, that is aftermarket feedback, you can call it. So it goes to it gets an approval here. The approval takes a good amount of time, and then it goes to. So I gotta actually set this up here because this is shorter. This much is what it is. Not there. This is aftermarket. So when it comes to phase 4, that means the doctor has prescribed a particular drug to you, and then let's say you go back and say, yeah, it worked fantastic. So that's a feedback. And in actual feedback system, the doctor is supposed to feed this info back to the company who is manufacturing this drug. And the same thing they have to do if they find out you reported that, dog, this is not working. Or you can say, come on, I'm having chest pain when I take this migraine pill. So that sort of feedback, because we're talking about a huge, vast majority. See, no matter how big subject set you take in case of phase 1, 2, 3, or even 3, you can't meet the whole population of this planet. So that's why phase 4 is basically a phase, but it's aftermarket. It keeps on getting the info. That's why I said infinite. As long as the drug is in the market, it's just the data is taken by the company and fed to the regulatory authorities also. Now, there's some important things. So this is how clinical trial is done. So the important thing is the time scale, and you got to understand this to understand how pricing is done. See, generally, manufacturing a drug in the lab is really cheap. It's darn cheap. It's probably cheaper than this chalk. But a clinical trial lasts for 5 to 15 years. These 3 phases I'm talking about, like starting from lab test to getting to the market. And it involves sometimes ranging from few millions to few $billion of investment from the company's perspective, because you're talking about medical practitioners who are going to take the records, who are going to take the data, like what happened when you took this drug, your BP went up, your blood sugar fell, what. So that's one investment. Site is the investment. Whether you own the hospital or you have rented a part of the hospital, that's also your investment. Then you got to pay the patients or somehow compensate them because they keep on coming, and there should be some sort of program, right? I mean, of course it's voluntary, but you got to compensate the people for the trouble they're taking to come from home, and and maybe the particular bus rents or the lunch, stuff like that you got to take care of. So all these things have a huge amount of cost involved. So that's why there's this 5 to 15 years, and some of the popular drugs, you would know that they even range till 17 or 18 years. The problem is different. The problem is, so when a drug comes to the market, the moment they start doing the trials or the moment they invent the chemical, the companies generally file a patent on it. Now this patent period is typically 20 years. So out of that 20 years, which starts from the time, the inception of the chemical, right, till it goes to the market, we're talking about 15 years or 12 years already spent. The company didn't actually earn anything within that phase. And they have about 8 years, 5 years, sometimes 2 to 3 years only to get back all the money from the market by selling that drug, that whatever they have invested on it, at least returning the investment from it. Right? And that's why what these companies do, they charge a lot for drugs that they invent newly and that comes in the market newly. What happens after that 20 years period? So after the 20 years period, 2 things happen. One is that some other company can start selling this drug. And they can, because the patent period is over and you can actually use the chemical. It's simple. It's as simple as patenting any software program or anything else. So that becomes a generic medicine. You've seen there are generic medical shops. What they do is that they take, these are companies which pick up the chemicals or drugs whose patent period is over and then create their own. And the price difference is humongous. So that's one thing that happens. The second thing that happens, that these companies, what they do, because they gotta keep on earning the money, right? They invested a lot. They switch one or two inert component in the whole composition of the drug. And then they do again the clinical trial, which they have to do in a shorter span of time. So for example, 3 years or 5 years in this case, because most of the thing is known. So they can fast forward the whole process. And then they, again, of course, at the time of changing that chemical and filing, getting that new drug out, they're filing a patent. So now the 20 years they're getting, out of that only 5 years or 3 years they're completing the study, they're getting a good amount of time to churn out the money from the market. So that's what they can do also. So sometimes you'd see the same drug, one doctor is prescribing something, the other doctor is prescribing something exactly the same, and just one component change. Sometimes that component doesn't really do much. Sometimes it does, absolutely does, and that's what makes it an entirely different medicine. But that's what it is. So I thought I should share this info because it should be useful. And see, this is for drugs. The same thing is done, let's say, to understand how EAAs affect our body, how a protein supplement, if you take on a body, if you give to an athlete right after the workout or within 24 hours of workout, what's the difference? So that's also a clinical study. Maybe the span is not that big, maybe 1 year, maybe 6 months, that's the span, because you're going to find out some info, you're not selling something out, right? So when I provide those NCBI links, those are National Library of California Health Institute, they list the clinical study data. So those pages that I list, they generally have this trial name that, okay, this was done and this is the outcome, right? We did this study for this many years and this was the subject set. So you got to go through all these things. So if the links that I provide, if you really want to go through those, you need about a couple of hours to go through those and then make sense out of that. Right? I would always suggest that you do that, and please don't mistake those links from just doing a Google search. See something written on the blog or something someone thinks is right, that sort of articles I don't generally push forward. I provide proper links to clinical trials, and I think those are helpful. So I think this video was helpful. If it was, please leave it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. And I thank you a lot for your time, for seeing this video. Have an awesome life, folks. Ciao.